The stuff that Massican's achieved, I know a lot of wineries in Napa Valley would love to have achieved the success of being poured by the glass for 10 straight years, a place like the French Laundry and Chez Panisse and blah, blah, blah.
You're listening to the Vint Podcast, bringing you expert interviews, alternative market insights, and exclusive access to the world of wine and spirits investing. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. My name is Brady, joined by Billy Galanko. How are you doing, Billy?
Quite dandy today. It's a sunny day here now in Los Angeles, finally.
Nice. It is raining, has been raining for many days, but we're not allowed to talk about the weather anymore. So let's transition quickly into you've taken another step in your WSET in your wine education journey, haven't you?
Yeah. No, sorry. I was saying the freezing because of the weather, maybe. No, well, I was going to say first, we can't start a podcast without talking about the weather. So we had, the wine journey is continuing. Hopefully the diploma's getting closer to an end. Yeah, I had my sparkling and my fortified exams, took them both on the same day last Wednesday as of this recording, and they went well. The prep was pretty fun, although I think I'm over sugary wines for a long time. Luckily, the fortifieds will keep, so they're here. But I got of the 6 blind tasting wines, I got 5 of 6. I got all the sparkling and had a small mix up with one of the fortifieds. There was one that was purposely put in there, I know, to trick me. So that was good. And the rest of the exam went well. And then on the Friday of last week, as of recording, I got my D3 results back and I passed that as well, which is more than 50% of the whole diploma program. That was the biggest step. These next 2, I feel pretty good. So hopefully I'll get those results, they said, by the end of March, according to this email I just read. So nice. I'll be done.
So what's your timeline for completing everything now? As of
March, if once I get those results, I'll be done in theory.
Completely. Okay. Yeah. And then, so moving on, what's the next stage in order to move on to candidacy for Master of Wine?
Yeah. So to apply for that, at the end of the application's open May 8th, I believe, for Master of Wine. So then there's a 2-step application process, kind of tests in a way, and they have questions. So you go through the first part. I also need a recommendation from an MW. Luckily, we have one on staff and another one on our advisory board, and they're due. And then once you submit that, you have another one that's due at the end of June. It's like a 2-parter, and then they'll get back to you by September, like their speedy way they do. So I could hear in September if I'm accepted, but we'll cross that when I get there. Hopefully I get the results I'm anticipating for these last 2 exams, and then we'll be off to the races.
Yeah, you've been, aside from your studies, you've been working on a lot, and a lot will change between now and then with the e-commerce platform you're spearheading as part of our coming out of our wine team and expanding our ability to both sell collections and provide unique asset opportunities in the marketplace. You want to talk to people a little bit about that?
Yeah, this has always been on Vint's roadmap to eventually offer some wines direct to consumer. We're in really early kind of exploratory days of doing this. So what we're going to start out with is basically having a website right now, thevintmarketplace.com, where you can go and sign up. You're entered into an email list. You can put wines that you're interested in. And it's basically, you'll send an email and then we will respond. We'll talk to you about what you might be interested in, wines that are available out of the Vint collection. So we'll talk about where you're located, what you're interested in, because right now with our permits and then the strict laws in the US about shipping wine to different states, you may be eligible for certain things and not others. Spirits or wine could be variable. And all of these wines are also listed on Wine Searcher. The main goal of this, and I've had a bunch of conversations now with different investors on our platform, is we are aiming to, again, expand and optimize our exit routes for all wines and spirits. The macro goal is to make as much money as possible for our investors. The D2C route does this by eliminating certain middlemen. Like some of the exits we've had have been either sometimes assisted by brokers, sometimes to merchants who will then again pass it on to a client. So the closer we can get, the more money we can make for investors and the more margin overall.
Yeah. And even especially with spirits too, I guess pretty common exit channel maybe is the auction circuit as well, or is that mainly acquisition for us?
That's mainly acquisition. There's a lot of value to be had there, and as we've mentioned before, the provenance for spirits is much easier to confirm just due to the complexity of some of the packaging. And also the stability of the liquid inside the bottle itself is better for spirits. That is not quite as important to be coming from a bonded warehouse or being in professional storage at all times. Obviously, the condition of the packaging needs to be pristine, but we're more open to source there. Exiting is more that would be more through private channels, direct to consumer. There's just, again, more margin to be had there. We can work with brokers or start building our own collections. So I wouldn't say the auction market is going to be a never, but it's not it won't be a common exit point for us.
Cool.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to check it out, vintmarketplace.com, not CO. We could have gone with the CO, but we went with the com for normalcy. And basically, if you just put in your email, we'll reach out to you and get in touch about anything you might be interested in it's on the Vint list. And we'll be able to share the full Vint list of wines that are available as well. Also, this is just the start. So if you want to just reach out and talk to us about how you like buying wine online, if you don't like buying wine online, different parts that you enjoy about the whole process, we would love to hear from you, because we're trying to still craft the end experience that'll evolve over time. So we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. And always interested in talking to folks about the kinds of wines that they would be interested in buying just overall. It's always good to have info about what sorts of wines we can potentially bring to this marketplace as it grows too, not just only in buying what we have, but just looking to expand, I think, that side of our business and understanding how we can add more value to our investors for sure. Cool. Yeah, a lot of good stuff on the horizon. We've talked about in previous episodes, other product changes and updates. So I think a lot to look forward to for this year. But sticking with this episode, we do have an interview coming up. So we'll go ahead and introduce our guest for today, Dan Petroski. Dan is the founder and winemaker at Massican Winery in Napa Valley. Basically, one of the top white wine producers in Napa. It's been served at top restaurants like the French Laundry since its inception. And that has, I think, been a really big boon for them in terms of increasing exposure. And the whole style and idea behind Massican is to introduce a lighter Mediterranean style of white wine to the region, focus specifically on that. I think it stands out because of those factors, especially in California and the Sonoma and Napa area. That style of wine has made them extremely popular. And as they continue to expand and grow, I think, their operations, Dan gives us some really good insight into what that process has been like and where they're going in the future. It was a good conversation, and Billy even purchased some of the digital assets that Dan had put out. Billy, do you want to talk about some of what that project was?
I'll just say first, I loved the conversation. I could chat with Dan for hours. He's a man after my own heart. First, the aesthetics on the Massican website are beautiful. He worked with a design agency. They had this special Massican Blue. He works with obscure varietals. He's into blockchain and just technology, anything that helps make wine more accessible. We'll mention that, like, the wines are sold at the French Laundry, but they're also an affordable price point. Like, it's not unattainable. So everything that he's trying to do with wine being attainable and technology driven in some senses, it's so cool. So so he has NFTs that are available. There were a couple. He's also featured on Som TV, free plug, I guess, for Som TV. But they had a small thing where they partnered with Cuvée Collective to offer basically a couple bottles and a tasting through their platform. So I got that, adding to my obscure wine NFT collections. But that'd be pretty cool. So I'm excited. And this was one of the most fun, I guess. For me, it was like hard for me just to stop asking questions podcast in a while.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to another episode of the podcast, and enjoy our interview with Dan.
All right. Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here, Billy. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Brady.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've given a little intro on who you are and what you're doing now, but it would be really exciting to give our listeners a little behind the curtain background into how you made your way into wine. Because I think while people do know you as a good winemaker, renowned winemaker, and launching your own brand, you don't really realize you started out writing, I believe, in your past life, like for sports and other things.
Yeah, so I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and just a kind of a working class family, and I didn't really travel much as a kid. So I was always using magazines as a means to going down to the magazine store, picking up the monthlies and the weeklies and reading them and escaping. I wasn't a book reader, I was a magazine reader. So that ended up eventually getting me into the magazine publishing world as internships in college. I worked for New York Times Company, worked for Brant Publications, which was the magazine, and Art in America magazine, Antiques, an interview magazine, which Andy Warhol started. And then eventually a job at Sports Illustrated. I built their websites in 1996, went down, covered the Olympics in 96 in Atlanta for them. A couple of years into that job at Sports Illustrated, I decided to pitch a couple of business ideas and magazine concepts to Time Inc., the parent company of Sports Illustrated. And they were like, what is this kid in the editorial department of Sports Illustrated pitching magazine ideas and building business plans. What's going on here? So they brass at the 34th floor of the Time Life building sent me over to Time Magazine and charted me a path through consumer marketing, finance, and sales. And along with that came management roles. And along with that came corporate cards. And for the late 90s, early 2000s, New York City, spending money, eating and drinking at some of the best restaurants. And back when we reminisce when wine, really beautiful, amazing bottles of wine were cheaper then. I did a great job of extending my T&E budget by reading about wine and learning that Joseph Phelps Insignia wasn't the only wine they made. They made all these other cool things. And I could tell my clients about these stories, and then whether it be Bordeaux producers or Napa Cabernet producers or whatnot, and not just buy the best and most expensive bottle on the list. And steakhouses all out around New York and fine dining restaurants. So that was how I got into wine. And I just became the guy in my community of friends and colleagues who just was the guy who knew about wine. And that was it. I did that for about 6 years before I started to ask myself, like, I have no idea how wine is made. You can't read the book. Everyone's like, the first book a winemaker or a budding wine student, Bill, you know this if you're studying for your exam. You read like the art or science of wine by Jamie Good. And I've read that book like 3 times. I have no idea what he's talking about. So I've been wine for 15 years. So I basically, I took a sabbatical and ended up working on a vineyard in Italy for a year back in 2005, 2006, came back to the United States. Didn't think I'd be in the wine making business, but I couldn't find a job in the wine selling business in New York City at the time. Ended up in California. And with that was an extension of my internship, my year and a half long stage of learning about vineyards and winemaking, working with a gentleman named Andy Smith at Dumal. And he was my bridge to Larkmead because he was also the consulting winemaker at Larkmead at the time. And at the end of that 06 harvest, he asked me to stay on full time at Larkmead as a cellar master and make the wines over there.
Wow. So you went basically from being the wine guy to want to learn more to being, cellar master. That's pretty cool. It's a pretty big jump.
Yeah. Cellar master to assistant winemaker, associate winemaker, and then winemaker in 2012. Yeah.
So when I first caught the wine bug, I was in the quartermaster sommeliers track. So I did those exams and I became the wine guy in my friend group. And I had the same thing. I was like, how is this made? So I went to Australia to work a vintage, but I didn't make the leap to go just become cellar master within a year and a half. What did your coworkers and family say when you decided to stay on?
I had to convince my family that they didn't know wine was a pursuit. Business. They didn't know it was a business, a pursuit. So they were like, what are we doing? I've had a really great run. I love magazines to death. I still subscribe to tons of magazines. I started a magazine through Massican. Now I'm into Substacks. I have 45 Substacks and 30 magazine subscriptions. So I'm still an avid consumer of weekly, daily, monthly media in its traditional forms. So I wasn't planning to make the leap. I didn't have no intention of being a winemaker. I had a curiosity. I think the winemaker Andy Smith at the time, we were slightly near each other in the same age group, so I had a bit more maturity. I had a curiosity. I spent time in Europe learning about other regions of the world other than just Russian Rim Valley Pinot at the time at Dumal. I worked hard and I was tireless, and harvest to me felt like I played college football, and harvest to me felt like you go and you do 3 a days and then for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you start the regular season. So harvest wasn't anything different for me. So August and early September was like football training camp. And so it was just all right, turn it on, get up and go. I don't care if you're tired, if you're hurt, if you're hungover, get up and go and do the best job possible and don't make any mistakes or you're not going to make the team. And that's how my first foray into it. But I was at the end of the harvest. I remember exactly the day. It was Halloween, October 31st, and near the end of the Dumal harvest, that was our last day of picking grapes back in 06. It was a long, cool year. And Andy was like, I want to hire you. And I was like, to do what? I was like, I don't want to make wine. So he goes, don't worry about it. You work hard. You're curious. You're responsible. And Larkmead at the time had just opened its doors in 05, 06. And they needed responsible people there. And it was only 3 or 4 people. They wanted people that can do a lot of stuff and feel confident that I'm going to open the doors and lock them at night. So that's responsible and hard worker and curious.
Wow. So how did your time there evolve? You stayed there for over a decade. So you ended up working your way up, becoming the winemaker, and tell us about it.
So it was that. So the early start of it was me putting on my kind of curiosity cap and tasting every day, tasting out of the cellar every day, understanding, writing notes. I taught myself the ideas of biodynamics and stuff by just tasting wine every day and writing notes and looking at temperature and looking at weather patterns and thinking about the ebbs and flows of the gravitational poles. And it's like, it was all just like working hard, asking questions and saying, why does it taste like this today and it tastes like that tomorrow, or it tasted like this yesterday? That was part one. Part two was being able to have a couple of different roles at the winery, because we were all like jacks of all trades, for lack of a better phrase. I did a couple of days in the tasting room. I did a couple of days just helping out with other projects. And so just my own personal edification, I have this weird love of writing business plans, like creating an idea and then writing a business plan behind it. So I started writing a business plan for a wine brand because I had exposure to all facets of the business at the time. And I needed to understand them. So I needed to record them and look at them from a statistical and a data and a math perspective. And I wrote a business plan early 2009 after being at Larkmead for 2 full years. And I sent it to all my buddies from business school. And I was like, does this business make sense? And they were like, no. And it was for Cabernet-based wine. And it's just like on the 5-year cash flow, like capital investment to make a world-class Napa Valley Cabernet that at the time would have cost $50 or $75 or maybe $100. This was 2009. The capital investment's huge. So I flipped the model to white wine, to just like a Sauvignon Blanc or a white-based wine, and the model worked. And it's like, you didn't need the capital investment that you need for starting a Cabernet brand. It's as long as you made a good wine, you bottled it, people enjoyed it, you sold it, you can hopefully have enough money to make more the next year. And that's how Massican started. It started with also this kind of weird feeling that the Napa Valley is very Mediterranean in its climate. It's not Mediterranean in its consumption of food and its eating patterns. The food is somewhat Mediterranean, like weird, but it's we have the weather, but we don't have the culture of eating like we're in the Mediterranean or drinking. Our wine styles aren't Mediterranean in style, even though the weather is Mediterranean in style. So I found that very odd after spending a year living the White Lotus lifestyle in Sicily for a year. I found that odd, and I thought that creating a white wine brand like Massican that kind of leaned into the Mediterranean meant more to me in the community of my friends and colleagues and peers, but it wasn't yet, what I think Napa Valley or even Sonoma County was used to. We're used to just having a lot of sunshine in a glass and make these beautifully delicious, bold red and white wines. And that wasn't what I was drinking when I spent a year living in a very similar climate. So I had a business plan and I had a creative idea, which was very pragmatic, which is drink Mediterranean white wines in a Mediterranean climate. And I pulled them together, and that was 2009. While I was still climbing the ladder at Larkmead, I started that on the side with 400 cases in 2009. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be bottling close to 8,000 cases of Massican.
Wow. Yeah. And then you left to work on Massican full time. Was it just last year, or how long ago was that?
Yeah. So 2021, summer 2021. So it's 2 vintages now, which has been great. And it's been fun. It's sold out most of the year, 2 or 3 months of the year, 4 months of the year. So I don't have enough wine to fulfill my demand. So it was really good for me to be able to get outside of myself, and I kept myself tethered to Napa Valley because of a day job. And now I have this opportunity to spend more time in Sonoma County sourcing grapes. I have more time to go a little afield and out to Lodi. There's an amazing old Italian farmers out there who have been growing grapes for the Gallo family for the last 50 years. And when they have some funky varieties like Cortese and Falangina and Greco and all these white grape varieties from the Mediterranean, from Italy, that I'm expanding my portfolio with. And the farming is good, and they're organic, and they're inexpensive compared to the luxury lifestyle of Napa and Sonoma. So it made a lot of sense for me to do that. And being someone who doesn't like to drive, if I go out and do my loops into these vineyards, it's 5 hours to get there and back. And I couldn't have a day job and do that. I have too much Catholic guilt to, like, say on a Wednesday leave and I'll see you at 1:00. And it just doesn't work for me as a professional. I need to cut the ties to anything here in Napa Valley so I can think about Massican's future potential.
When you first branched off and started to present this idea of a white-only winery to folks adjacent to you in the industry, did you get a weird eye? Did you have to win people over? What was the perception back then?
I think back then, the because it all came out of, John Bonet summed it all up in his book, New California, in 2011 or so, whatever that was. But there's a lot of stuff that was still, there's a bell curve, right? In the middle of that bell curve is all the Napa Valley Cabernet and Merlot and Chardonnay production. And then there's the fringes. And then the fringes were either old vines or new vines. Most of it was old stuff that had been in the community. I remember doing a report on 120 plus years of Larkmead's history, and they had 20 at the time. They had 28 grape varieties planted on the property over the course of 120 years. Now, when I left, they were focused on 7, right? And then we did some trials for climate change, added on 6 or 7 new grape varieties on top of that for climate change purposes. But so there was Napa, Sonoma, and California wine country was very diverse. It started with the diversity of the population that kind of settled here in the 1800s, the Germans, the French, the Italians, and the Spanish. And then kind of Prohibition wiped all that out. And then we started again post-Prohibition. And then it finally got very narrow. I think people from a marketing business brand perspective, there's a lot of quiet competition and competing against each other. And I don't compete against any of them with Massican. It's a cute little thing. It's a cute little thing that's become incredibly powerful, and it's gotten recognition. And the stuff that Massican has achieved. I know a lot of wineries in Napa Valley would love to have achieved the success of being poured by the glass for 10 straight years. A place like the French Laundry and Chez Panisse and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm very fortunate I blah, blah, blah it, but it's more going towards what you got to meet people where they are. The French Laundry and Chez Panisse and fine dining restaurants they're about either rustic, light, bright, fresh fare, or they're about technique and style and design. And just because you make a wine and you're a neighbor doesn't mean it belongs in that restaurant. It's a two-way street when it comes to pairing things, whether it be pairing a dish at home with your wine or at a restaurant. It's a two-way street. You have to understand their business model before you think that your business model just fits. And I think that's a big problem here in wine country. Just because we make it doesn't mean it should be.
I don't know what they pair Insignia with at the French Laundry, but I imagine that it dominates whatever they're putting on the table. So I think that kind of makes sense in meeting them where they're at.
No offense to Insignia. I love that wine, but using it as the representation of Napa Valley Cabernet. It's one of the oldest standing wines. Insignia started in 72, 73. So it's a legend. It's an icon.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really smart approach.
I want to ask, go ahead.
No, Brady, you go. I'll tack on.
I just wanted to pivot to your kind of design aesthetic around Massican and how that was maybe influenced by your time in magazine publishing, these kinds of things. Looks like it is.
Yeah, when I first started with a little bit of cash in the bank to make something happen, I basically took a mashup. When you're a wine geek, I can see Brady behind you. You got a couple of empty bottles up over your shoulder. When you're a wine geek, you save a lot of your bottles like that. Your favorite wines that you've had. Mine tend to be somewhat aesthetically interesting as well, on top of my flavor taste profile that I appreciated. So I started looking at the bottles that I loved over time, and I was like, as I was thinking about the Massican brand, I was like, what do I want it to look like? So I made a mashup of a lot of my favorite wines of Italy. And I came from Sicily, and Passo Pisciato had these beautiful labels with all this kind of old handwriting on it and these vintage dates and these really large formats. Paolo Bea had this beautiful blue. Santa Chiara was one of my favorite quote unquote orange wines. The whole concept of Nebbiolo with the bar on top where you see Conterno or Gaia. So my original designs for Massican was literally just a mashup of all of that. I remember taking the capsule off of Yves Gangloff Condrieu and giving it to the capsule provider in Napa Valley and said, match that color for my capsule. So I basically stole from all my heroes and made my own version of Massican's label, and it was cheap and easy, and we just laid it out. It was great. 10 years into Massican, I said, it's time to officially design a label and design a concept. And when I went into that process, it was very dominated by understanding art and design and understanding how people engage. So I said, I wanted to own a color. I said, centering isn't a design technique. I can do that on my Word doc. I said, I want to feel like I feel when I touch and grab and hold an Aesop product that you may pick up in a restaurant or hotel bathroom. And I want to be able to identify it, feel good that these guys have the same aesthetic, and then come to it. And it's intimate, right? Not only do you put the stuff on your face, you have to actually touch it to read it. You have to look at it. That's the thing with a wine bottle. You actually have to hold it to experience it, to understand it, to see what you're pouring. You look at the vintage date, you can examine it. It's like in your hand. It becomes an intimate moment. So We identified the color, blue. Blue is probably the most widely globally loved color. 60-something% of people say color blue is their favorite color. I wanted Massican blue to be something more Mediterranean. So we went to the south. Monte Massico is in the south of Italy, just north of Naples. So you have Pompeii there. You have just south of Naples. And that whole Mediterranean vibe is a thing called Pompeian blue, which is this kind of weather-worn blue that comes from Egyptian blue, which was the first synthetic that came from ultramarine, which came from Afghanistan. So you get this nice powder blue, weather-worn color blue of the Mediterranean. So that was our color. And we pulled that color off a 1,600-year-old fresco. And then with the composition, Massican's shitty on Instagram, right? Because it's like Aesop. If it's in the distance in the background, you can identify it through color and composition, but you can't identify which one it is. Everything is super small and intimate. But we set it up to make it look like a page of a book or handwritten letter. So it was like a line left. And that ties back to my publishing career. So it's on a line left, and it's like title, chapter, verse, page numbers, the vintage. And then you turn the bottom, it's all handwritten in Italian, my handwriting. Turn the page over and it translates to English. And so it was very thoughtful. Like everything we did was incredibly thought out, because it ended up happening that I said, if I do something, I want to be able to tell a story about it. And I did. I just told you the whole story about the creation story of my label. And my label is in the Harvard Library of Pigment, and it's under Massican Blue. And it's being recorded. Cool. It's recorded in the library because their pigment library captures everything they can capture over time with regards to color, whether they have crayons from the 60s or they have dust from chalk in the 1800s, so that they can actually chemically understand it. So when someone comes to say 100 years from now, hey, I want to represent Massican Blue on my wine label, go to the Harvard Library, they'll have the Massican Blue recorded, and they'll be able to tell you what the composition is if you want to reuse that color. It's not trademark or anything like that.
Wow. That's an incredible story. And I will say the bottles are gorgeous. So you succeeded there. And I like the idea of having to bring it closer and have more of that intimate experience. How did you, taking like a one step back, how did you develop the name Massican? We haven't asked yet. I just realized.
Even then it was hard. Today it's even harder to come up with a name for anything. I tend to keep lists of things. And then now that we have phones, it's so much easier. But I was just writing a list of different things I would call brand. And my biggest regret, my biggest mistake in life is calling it Massican. And the reason for that is when I was growing up in wine in New York City as a wine consumer, I didn't speak French, I didn't speak Italian at the time, and it was really hard for me to pronounce certain things on the wine labels. And I think wine, as intimidating as it is, a lot of it has to do with the language barrier and being able to pronounce and understand. And then on top of that, you add geography to a French wine label. And now you're really screwing with Americans, right? Americans don't know who the hell Idaho is, let alone. So I did the worst thing possible. Created a name that you probably couldn't pronounce and didn't know what it meant. Easy enough. Not to say that Cameron Diaz, anyone knows what Aveline means, right? It's just an easy name, and it sounds like a Roxy Music song and all this other stuff. But it's easy, and it's like it flows and it feels good. But Massican is a Monte Massico. Monte Massico is where my great-grandparents were born in southern Italy, just north of Naples. So it's the Massican Hills. And I named my first wine after their granddaughter, my mother, Anya. Oh, and that was because my mother never drank white wine. She was a red wine drinker. So it was like a story behind it. And I needed a fanciful name because it wasn't a 100% grape variety wine. It was a blend. It was Tokai, Filano, Ribolla Gialla, Chardonnay at the time, and still is to this day. And so I started just using all these fanciful names for my wines. Mina is named after the ancient Roman grape, Amanea Gemina, which is tied to Greco, and that's a Greco-based wine. Sauvignon Blanc is Sauvignon Blanc. Hyde is Hyde Chardonnay, Hyde Vineyard Chardonnay. So that's my homage to not only the classicism of single vineyard designations, but it's a cool name. And I'm making some other blends for a national Whole Foods project that I call the Emilia Bianco. I offered them the words Vino Bianco because I thought Vino and Bianco, even if you try really hard to speak another language, I think you can translate Vino Bianco if you don't. So is that white wine? But they loved Emilia Bianco, which is named after my great grandparents who were from the Massican Hills. And that was, and so I have all these kind of fanciful names. For me, what the one throughput is, you may not pronounce the name, you may not understand the grape variety, but if you, through word of mouth or through critical acclaim or through any other reason, through this suggestion at a restaurant or a retail shop, when you taste the bottle of Massican, I want you to understand what the goal is for it, which is the simple, delicious freshness of a light, bright, white Mediterranean wine. And I want you to feel that you can trust that. So whether you're buying Ania, Gemina, or Emilia Bianca at Whole Foods, or Sauvignon Blanc at a restaurant, or buy the glass somewhere, I want you to be able to say, I trust Massican is going to give me this Mediterranean white wine sensibility over and over and over again. And there may be some variances in the flavor profiles and the grape varieties. And I don't know what the fuck they are, but I trust, and this wine is delicious. And that's my goal in life. And that's what I think about every day when I wake up. But I'm probably the only person who thinks about that every day when they wake up. I'm the only person who thinks about Massican every day when I wake up. It's tough. It's a problem.
How much, when you first started, in terms of how you messaged and did branding around these releases, focused on educating people about the grape varieties that you were using? Or is it always more about, and does it continue to be more about the concept of making the style you just described? Or
I'm not a person, I grew up in New York City, so I don't have this elevated palate, right? I don't have this, I can smell gooseberry from a mile away. Because I don't even know what a gooseberry is, even 40 plus years later. So I always avoided the concept of tasting notes. And it was, for me, it's, again, wine is so intimidating. And it's so the power of persuasion. I can tell you what you're smelling. I can tell you, Brady, what your microphone dust jacket smells like right now, because I've experienced it, right, in some capacity. And it's musty and it smells the last thing you ate because your food gets stuck in your mustache like mine, and you're close to it, and it's like smells like Cool Ranch Doritos. But so that's how I think about wine, right? I think about it as I've always tried to avoid my early stages of Massican's branding and concept was I tried to be a wine bro. And like my wife called me out on this. You talk to your customers like they're your wine bros, right? That's why 65% of your customers are men, and they're your age. They're your constituents, right? You're not talking to a broader audience. You don't know what women want and where they want it and how they want it from a consumer packaged goods perspective. So I had to think about that a lot. And I remember when I relaunched my website a couple of years ago, I used to have case production and alcohol and like all these technical data. Like, who the fuck cares? Really, who cares? So now what I did was I took all the reviews of the Massican wines from Wine Enthusiast and Wine Spectator, which has reviewed my wines for a bunch of years now. And I take each wine's review and I take all the thing and I just create word clouds. And so if you go to my website and you look at Massican Ani, it says smells like, tastes like. So you immediately know that this wine smells like X and tastes like Y, as opposed to me trying to be fancifully crafting a sentence that makes you so desirous of my wine that you have to press buy now. Like, I'm not into that. So you'll probably see a lot more like AI generated content coming out of Massican that flows into the vibe that I'm trying to accomplish by aggregating content in a more meaningful way, because I'm a one-man show, right? So I'm not like, I don't have a team. I'm writing a cookbook right now. I have a small team of people that I've hired to do that. When I was writing the news magazine, I had a small team of people who I hired as consultants and freelancers to help me do that. Similarly, when I wrote the lifestyle magazine for the year, I had a small team of people that I freelanced, but I'm basically spending most of my time on editorial endeavors, and ChatGPT is just, it's been a godsend for the last 6 months.
I'm so happy you brought that up. The podcast that's going to air right before you, we talked to a guy extensively about AI, and I'm sure everybody's, what does this have to do with wine? Here you go.
Yeah. Let me just say this, and you can steal this for your previous podcast. ChatGPT is, for someone who comes from the publishing industry, ChatGPT and AI helps you get over writer's block. Anyone can take existing words and flush them out and make them perfect and relevant to you. But a lot of people have a hard time writing the first word. So if you can get a story, like I went into chat, I was joking around, like I've had so many fun different little ChatGPT things with a bunch of friends. And one of them was like, tell a story about a Mediterranean white wine made by a guy named Dan in Napa Valley. And it tells the whole story. One of my friends said, write a rap song about Massican. And it's just like the shit that comes out of it is amazing. And we're only scratching the surface. Wait to chat GPT-4 comes out. When
Oh, yeah.
2022 is just, I feel like the content generation in 2022 is exponentially more interesting and powerful than it was prior to that.
Yeah, I think their inputs were like 4,000 or something, and now it's like 60,000 for the next version. So it's gonna be.
Yeah.
But so we do have some technology type things and NFT conversation towards the end here. But before we shift completely, I want to talk about the grapes. So you started out with Friulano, you got Tokai Friulano. I know they have to take off the name now, the Tokai part, and then Ribolla Gialla, Chardonnay. What else? So you're working with some Greco, some Falangina. What else now?
Yeah.
Or wines.
The brand started because back in the day, part of the thing you do every year, and I just submitted it, is the California Grape Crush Report. It's like how many grapes you crush, and what varieties you crush, where you crush them, so that the state of California can keep a tally. And you get this report every year and you flip through it and it's like, where the hell is that grape being grown? Oh my God, there's 10 tons of that in Napa? Where is that? So then you start doing your searches and I found these things. But while I was living in Italy, I traveled a bunch and I fell in love with Tokai Friulano because I just found it to be such an incredible food pairing wine. It had the sensibility to go from Tokai Friulano, Tokai in the region of Friuli is an hour and change north of Venice. So the variety itself had the flexibility of being consumed with fish and the Adriatic Sea down there. And then it also had anything up into the mountains where, some of the Friulians and northern Italians were eating goulash, beef stew. So you can pair this thing from a fish dish to a beef stew. And I found that to be incredibly flexible and engaging, and the flavor profiles I enjoyed. So that was always going to be the core of my brand. Ribolla was very unique and rare. Chardonnay was common. Sauvignon Blanc was common. But over time, I was able to just have access to other things. And I became the guy who was doing the weird Italian grape varieties alongside people like Steve Mathias. And everyone was doing a bunch of stuff. But when it came down to the focus, I think in 2021, I made 33% of all the Tokai and Ribolla planted in California as a winery, as a winemaker. And I just started to realize that it's going to be a bear to continue to grow this stuff, plant this stuff, but there's stuff that might be still out there. And again, like I mentioned, like there's old farmers out in Lodi who work with the Gallows forever. And so just through friendships and colleagues and word of mouth, I started expanding. So now I'm working with 11 different vineyards, 11 different grape varieties. I tend to try to, within a vineyard, I did, for example, in 2022, I made 24 harvests through 11 vineyards. I tend to work with a farm and a farmer, and I try to do more than one thing with them because I want to minimize my drive time. I don't want to go drive an hour to a Ribolla vineyard, then an hour to another vineyard, and an hour. I want to see if over time, over 12, 13 years, I can build a relationship with someone so that they plant, when they have an acre come available, we plant a grape variety or we come on a long-term plant. So over the 12 or 13 years, I've been doing that. I've been working with farmers to grow my relationship with them. And that's been happening at a very good pace. And it will continue to happen in our next 3 to 5 years, which I'm excited about. So Tokai, Ribolla, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Malvasia, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Bianco, Falangina, Greco, Corte Moscato. I think that's 11.
That's close. So you really cover with the Greco and the Falangina closer to that Campagna side of your family, but then Cortese from up north. And Moscato, It's also growing everywhere, and so is Malvasia, depending. That's cool. It's almost like a snapshot of Italy in a glass.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Billy, because my blends this year are actually moving in that direction. Whereas in the past, I used to blend Pinot Bianco and Greco together, so I have the north and the south come together in a glass. And this year, it's actually going to be Greco and Falangina, so it's going to remain southern.
Oh, cool.
The Ani has always been Tokai, Ribolla, Chardonnay, which is a very common kind of mixture cuvee. Cortese is going to be blended this year with Pinot Bianco, so it's going to stay up in the north. Malvasia is, like you said, it's grown everywhere. It's grown in Sicily, it's grown in the north, mostly the north, and then also in some southern warm parts and central Italy. So I'm actually having a lot of fun and being more focused. Opposites attract in some instances, but also what grows together goes together. So I'm super excited about the future potential opportunities of growing these little bottlings of Massican. I'm doing 6 right now and growing their volumes.
Awesome. I haven't had the privilege to have one yet, but I just got one of your NFTs recently that enables me to have a couple. So I'm looking forward to that. But on that same note, it looks like you've been pioneering the move for a white wine emoji. And then you also, that was your second batch of NFTs that I participated in. You had another one. So tell us about the technology side and the quest for the white wine emoji.
Yeah, I think, Kendall Jackson with the dominance of Vintner's Reserve Chardonnay, they posted up like, oh, we want the white wine emoji. And then like New Zealand got in on everything. They wrote these petitions. And Unicode, who controls emojis, was like, it's not a red wine emoji, it's a wine glass emoji. It's devoid of race, color, creed, taste, flavor, whatever. It's just a wine glass emoji. So we don't need a red and a white. And so Unicode just canceled it. Said, no, they just kept saying no. And so I was like, I should create the white wine emoji. And I thought, do it as an NFT. And I started doing it as an NFT. And I was like, I can't really do the white wine emoji as an NFT if I don't actually have a white wine emoji. And so I worked with a friend of a friend to design this like 30-second digital origin story of an NFT of a white wine emoji, which is two people having a text exchange. And you can go see it. It's on OpenSea. It's on my Instagram. And but then I actually did the hard work, which delayed me like 6 months, of figuring out how to code to create an app for the iPhone. So I coded an app. So there's a Massican app in the iPhone that allows you to download about 50 wine and cocktail emojis for your phone. Cool. They're called stickers, and they'll go right into your iMessage, like across the bar above your keyboard, and like you hit the M, and then it'll show you a Negroni, a dirty martini with olives, martini with a lemon, Moscow mules. We have White Claw in there, and then we have orange wine, pink wine, rosé wine, like all the different things. So it's 50 different emojis. You can buy it for 99 cents.
Nice.
And so the white wine emoji exists, but it exists as a sticker app. It's not part of the Unicode segment of that. And so NFTs became important to me. So my one true passion outside of like magazines and publishing is art. And 2017, 2018, there were two young women from NPR who were going to create a journalism on the blockchain through this program called Civil, And so my wife and I were going to invest in it. And at the time, we were like, well, how much do you want to give? $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 of Ethereum. I was like, so we were about to buy $10,000 worth of Ethereum, and they decided they weren't doing that program. So we did not buy $10,000 worth of Ethereum in 2018. Wish we did. But I've been following the blockchain and the concept of what the blockchain is. And I do feel that the blockchain is going to be 20, 30, 40 years from now. I think a lot of personal public data and transparent data of contractual information and product will be on the blockchain. So I do think like in 2040, 2050, 2060, every part in your Tesla will have been recorded on the blockchain, so that when you buy your Tesla, you'll be able to see all the last nuts and bolts of the car and have it recorded with its metadata to understand it's all of its proof of existence and all of its information that you need to know, where it's been manufacturers, how to replace it, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to happen. Just CryptoKitties as a concept created NFTs because they were trying to figure out blockchain was created because of the housing crisis in 2008, 2009. And then CryptoKitties was how to create contracts on the blockchain and through housing, and they couldn't figure it out. And so then they ended up creating this fun animated game around cats. Cats were super cool memes on Reddit during 2016, 17, 18. And they created this how to breed cats game. And now there's 20 million CryptoKitties bred in 5 years, and it was all done on the blockchain through non-fungible tokens. And it was meant to see if the technology worked. And it became a very viral game. And the technology works. They proved it. So you can so they have an origin story from the first two kittens to 20 million. And I think the blockchain is the recording of the origin story of the future, right? So anything that's done today. So this year, it's now January, my goal is to plant a vineyard on the blockchain, meaning we're going to plant a vineyard in real life, but we're going to record everything that happens to that vineyard on the blockchain. So that when 4 years from now, when I bottle my first wine from that vineyard, that's the end of the recording, and then it gets sold to you and consumed by you. It's then at that point you can choose to record the data to like what you felt like it tastes like, and then you can connect that to your cellar tracker or to your Vivino app and whatever. So you can say, okay, here's all the information that ever happened. Does anyone really give a shit if it rained on January 12th, 2024 in the vineyard? No, but can we record it? Yes. Is it helpful for someone 100 years from now to know all this data, to have all this accessible information, what chemicals we used in the vineyards, what rootstocks, harvest dates, weather dates. All that stuff is just a recorded history. I work on, you can't manage what you can't measure. I feel like the wine industry has done a really poor job of measuring things, especially as we're moving into conversations around carbon capture and sequestration. And we're thinking about stuff like we haven't been measuring any of this stuff. We haven't been measuring fossil fuel use in vineyards, on farm, off farm. Like, we're starting to do that now. And instead of just putting it in a spreadsheet and then it gets lost somewhere because, someone's job changes or some organization changes, moves over, you can start putting all this stuff on the blockchain. It's going to be super powerful. Anyway, it's my long story. Like, it's just it's the record of everything moving forward contractually and also from the origin story of stuff. And I think it's going to, 10 years from now, we're going to all ask ourselves, how did we live without a crypto wallet? Because the crypto wallet isn't about having cryptocurrency. It's about having information that you can then access. I look at the crypto wallet as an easy path to a bridge. You drive your car through it, it connects to it, and lets you onto the other side. My former employer, Time Magazine, is probably the greatest old OG moving into the modern technology. You can go to Time Magazine's website, time.com, and connect your wallet. As long as you own a timepiece, which is one of their NFTs, that they have this whole community of artists building these, you have free access to the paywall, through the paywall. Oh, wow. So it's your personalized way to get through the paywall by just hitting connect wallet and then accepting it. 2 buttons. You don't have to remember a password. You don't have to remember anything. They go in, they look at your wallet, they see that you have a timepiece, you've paid your toll, you're in. You don't have a timepiece, your wallet doesn't connect. So you can buy a timepiece right then and there, and then that's your subscription. So there's things like that. I remember working at Time Magazine when Walter Isaacson in 1995 was talking about micropayments on the internet. This crypto wallets are going to be the micropayments of the internet, of Web 2. It's going to be the Web 3. It's going to be your means of moving around, and that anonymously. You won't need your name, email, password, or anything. You'll just you'll have some money in this wallet to pay fees, but it'll be your way of moving around the internet basically on one click. And I think we're all going to be like, shit, how did we not live with this in 10 years? Because it's such a simple technology. I think there's just a bunch of bad actors, bad marketers who've made NFTs and the blockchain into something that is not what it was originally built for.
Yeah, and they'll get weeded out over time. I have so many questions. Brady, do you have anything before I
I'm just wondering, we're talking about technology and NFTs and ChatGPT and white wines in California, white wines only in Napa Valley. Who are your peers? Who do you commiserate with about these things in California maybe, or maybe just in Napa specifically?
Well, I think a lot of people have to listen to me bullshit all the time about this stuff. No, I don't really. I wake up and do things that get me excited. And other people wake up and get excited about whatever they get excited about. Do you know Dave
McGee at Monochrome?
I met him briefly in a tasting in Los Angeles. Yes.
It's like
I don't know him, but I know
former stealth fighter jet engineer at Stanford who started making white wines in Paso, white wine only kind of producer. It made me think of the projects
Brady just really likes white wine only producers. So
yeah.
No, but I think about it. I say this to everybody. No one likes to hear it, but when I kind of talk about their businesses, tell me the one thing you do great, because that's the one thing you're going to be remembered for. And if you talk about the great white winemakers of the world, you're going to go right to Burgundy and white Burgundy, and you're going to go to the Raveneaux and the Dauvissats, and you're going to go to Rouleau's and the Coche, and you then can maybe on your way west, you're going to stop in Sancerre and talk about Dagenot, and you're going to talk about Cotard. And they do one thing they do really well. They make white wine. And the same can be said for red wine. Yes, I know DRC has one of the most expensive white wines in the world, but that's not going to go on their tombstone. DRC's tombstone is going to be the greatest producer of single plot Pinot Noir ever. And you think about Napa Valley Cabernet, yes, you're going to be the Napa Valley Cabernet, like you're going to be the one thing. So for me, with Massican, I'm fortunate to say, Dan Petroski makes Mediterranean white wines in Napa Valley in the state of California better than anyone else. And the most important. So my peers, when I think about who I compete against the greatest. I compete against Kendall Jackson's Vintners Reserve as what you're going to drink tonight. I compete against Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio against what you're going to drink tonight. I don't compete against Staglin family or Larkmead or whoever. I don't. Like it's not my motivation, because I want to provide a different course. And so for me, it's creating that vision and that vibe and that message. Now my goal is I never had the wine to worry about messaging. In the next 2 to 3 years, I'm going to have a lot of wine, and I'm going to have to worry about messaging. I'm going to have to worry about marketing. I have to worry about selling. I have to worry about who the consumers are and where they are.
Yeah.
I'm doing all that. I've done it all in the background. I do a ton of advertising on Google. I do a ton of advertising. I've done Pinterest. I've done Google. I've done magazines, newspapers. I advertise, I collect data. I know who my customers are today. I need to find who my $24.99 to $29.99 customer is tomorrow. Where are they? What are they drinking? Are they drinking Conundrum? Are they drinking Santa Margarita? Are they drinking Cloudy Bay, Sauvignon Blanc? Those are my customers of the future, and people like them. So when I have wine to sell to them, that's my job in the next 12 to 18 months. So yeah. I live in my own world when it comes to, Brady, to answer your question. I don't commiserate with people. Everyone here does what's in front of them, and they tend to veer from their path. And I don't have hospitality. I don't have a desire to only be in restaurants and sell, and a desire to be shoulder to shoulder with the great Bordeaux wines of the world or the great Burgundy wines of the world. I have a desire to have more bottles of Massican on more tables than I possibly can. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is something that I've not grappled with in a really deep way, but why is Santa Margarita still able to get charged $25 to $30 a bottle when there's so much Pinot Grigio, quality Pinot Grigio available these days? Boggles me.
They've been in America since 1961.
Right.
So they have a history here. That's one. And so with that history, they have a network of distribution that's been built over 50 plus years. And the beauty of Italy, and this is why I lean into it in my life, not only, and I'm half Italian on my mother's side, rather than France, is that you don't have to explain Italy. You also never met a single person who came back from Italy and had a bad trip.
True.
You have to explain France, you have to explain French dining. I used to joke all the time, you come home on a Friday night, you boil water, open a jar of sauce, have a dry box of pasta, and it transports you right back to Tuscany or to Rome. You can't do that with French food. It takes you 6 days to recreate sauce.
And 10 pounds of butter.
Yeah, so it's just, Italy is easy. Anyone could fake speaking the language. Pinot Grigio, use your hands. And it's simple. And it's easy, simple, and delicious. And the minimalism of Italian food and wine culture, even though there's hundreds and hundreds of Italian wine grapes, the minimalism of what they mean to the food and wine and culture and terroir there, it's something you can grasp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the Hollywood has done a great job. Not only do we have a lot of fun, you have the Rat Packer and Frank Sinatra, and then Hollywood did a great job of just making the Italian lifestyle very creative, great what's the word I'm looking for? Notoriety for Italy. It's just it's simple. You I'm sorry. You just don't feel intimidated going to an Italian restaurant, right?
Yeah.
You go to a French restaurant, you're intimidated.
Agreed.
So,
but my beef
on top of that, it's even more intimidating.
My beef isn't with Pinot Grigio. I like their producers like Elena Volk or Germain, who have these really quality wines. I'm just wondering why people keep going to I know they've always done it. It's one of those legacy brands, and they're going to keep. I used to work in advertising, so that's a case study of strong brand. But it's just interesting to me that it's still able to capture that even today.
My goal is not to. My goal is, I look at the world in two ways, and this is a really bad school mindset, but I look at bell curves and pie charts. Pinot Grigio owns this much of the pie. What's my slice of that pie? Am I going to grow the pie, or am I going to steal some of their share? So if there's 650,000 cases a year, and I want to be 65,000 cases, I'm not going to steal 10% of their market share.
Right.
I have to grow it a little bit and steal 5% of their market share. How do I do that? And then I don't want to be them. I want to be the California version of them that people aspire to, and it has a little bit more of a kind of a premium price product. And they can say, oh, this is the California version, boom. And then the bell curve is the same thing as you mentioned, Elena Volk and Germain. here's Santa Margarita here, but then those guys' production is here, and it's more fine, refined production, smaller production, higher price point. So it's just where do you fit in these two in these two examples, in the pie and then also in the bell curve. And Santa Margarita just did a great job eating up the entire middle, right? Yeah. And making it easy. And this brands into that in every facet of industry.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I just would pay $5 to $10 less, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, back to your vineyard. One, I want to know where are you planting? And two, I read a little bit about you having some efforts in the metaverse. Are you going to try to plant a vineyard in the metaverse as well?
The metaverse is, so the in real life planting is in talks in Napa, in a small part of Napa, but also in Carneros. So we're working through that now. We won't need to do that until June. And then it's a long progress. It's a 3 or 4 year progression. Yeah. The metaverse for me is, I am trying to create a place where we can have this conversation. I believe in virtual tastings, right? Like really, the NFT offers you a virtual tasting. We can experience it. You're drinking a glass of water now. I'm drinking a coffee. We can be drinking a glass of wine and still having this virtual conversation. So I don't have the means and the technology to build my own Zoom. But what the blockchain has created, and what is on top of the blockchain, are these metaverses, these worlds that are created that are software based. And so I could create a little, I'm not even going to call it a metaverse. I'm just going to call it Bar Massican. Let's meet at Bar Massican. I'll send you a link. I'll tell you these are the 2 things you have to do to sign in and get an avatar. And then here's the location, and you land in Bar Massican. And then you, Brady, and I are sitting there in a bar that looks like this timeless classic Italian bar, having this conversation just like we are right now. Instead, now I'm just looking at Brady's microphone and your headset, and I'm trying to decipher what the bottles of wine are in the back of over Brady's right shoulder. But now we'll just be doing that in a space, and it will exist in quote unquote whatever we want to call this future metaverse. Right now, I'm not doing it because there's no one there, and I'm not trying to bring customers off the street right now. I want to bring these engagements. I'm going to be doing, with that NFT Cuvée Collective project, I'm doing 90 virtual tastings. I'm doing 90 Google Meets or 90 Zooms.
That's a lot.
Year. I have 3 of them scheduled, but I have to do 87 more this year. So do I always have to, we're just pumping it through Zoom. We're pumping it through Google Meet. I use Google Meet because it links it to my calendar. But if I can give you a link that brings you to a place that's called Bar Massican, I need to get this idea of the metaverse out of everyone's heads. Yeah. Because Zoom and Google Meet are some sort of, is all I'm trying to put us in an environment, an experiential environment that instead of just doing Zoom and Google Meet.
I noticed on my NFT, we could meet in Sandbox. And so I own a couple pieces of land around Sandbox. I was mainly trying to get to where are you going to build, and I'll just be your neighbor. And then
Yeah. I started thinking about this before investing tons of money. I started thinking about, I want to, it's not just the 90 people that's both those NFTs. I have 5,000 other customers, right? And as we know, the data is like 16% of all US people have crypto wallets at this moment. I'm going to spend this year looking at what are the easiest existing metaverses, platforms that I could build into that is the easiest consumer engagement. How do I get a customer from point A to point into Bar Massican in 3 steps, as opposed to that's not happening on Sandbox. So if I'm going to go and spend all this money buying land in Sandbox to be next to Snoop or Adidas or somebody, and I'm like, and no one's fucking there now. So it's not like anyone's there, and not like anyone's spending money there. So I want to create my own Bar Massican. I don't care where it exists. It might be voxels, it might be spatial, it might be Avican Life or whatever. I just need to find out what's going to be from click to sitting in Bar Massican, the easiest, non-intrusive step to someone who doesn't have a crypto wallet.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So that's what I need to figure out before I push forward. I have Bar Massican design, but it's all laid out. I have all the art, the CAD files, everything. I have the actual, and I built it to be timeless, to be this nice old school Italian bar you find in Rome or in Milan, or hopefully someplace in New York, or Bar Pisolino in New York, or Bar Termini in London. Has all the vibe of those, taking Italy and bringing it somewhere else. So I have that done. I just need to find the next space to, I just need to find a space to do it. I need a year. People aren't ready for it. I don't want to push something that doesn't make sense.
Agreed. Yeah, I have land, but I still am not quite sure how. I still don't know how the whole thing works. I just bought land just in case for the long run.
Oh, it's a smart move.
But cool. So speaking of other cool things, in the article I read, basically it just said you like to hang out with people doing cool shit. So who's doing cool stuff? What other partnerships are you doing? That article mentioned like gin and coffee, and you're doing a lot of stuff outside of just only wine. What else is there?
I wish I had more time and energy and effort and to meet more cool people. But I think everything in life is you want to be excited about what you do. You want to wake up pumped and ready to get going as soon as you get out of bed. And I am, and I feel that way. And I'm fortunate, like working with the chef who's writing my cookbook and the writer who's James Beard award-winning writer and a Michelin-starred chef she was on Top Chef, and like working with people who are really cool and writing this timeless content. Like I could spend $5,000 a month on a social media manager, an influencer to design my Massican Instagram, and it would look like a bunch of bottle shots like everyone else's Instagram. And seeing people cheersing and here's a charcuterie plate. That means nothing to me, right? I am going to spend a year writing a cookbook and I have timeless content forever. That recipe doesn't go old. Cookbooks stay on your shelf for as long as you have them. And it's about working with people who think of their business in a different way. So she literally I knew Sarah for years, and she literally was videotaping herself and posting on Instagram and on TikTok and going viral and had tons of followers and all this shit. And I was like, hey, we could work together. I want to do that for Massican. What do we want to do? And then I came up with the idea of writing the cookbook. So that's one thing. The other thing is I have to leave in a few minutes because I'm going over to Healdsburg. A buddy of mine who's a winemaker, Sam Bilbro at Idlewild, he did the first Massican collab project. What that was I asked him as a winemaker to pretend he's like a rock band. He's covering a Massican song. So make a wine as if you're making a Massican wine, but you're actually Idlewild. And if you covered my song in a concert. And so now I'm doing 6 of them this year. I have one that just landed in the port of Oakland from Australia. I'm making one in Oregon with Ken Paul. I'm in Santa Barbara County next week on Wednesday to go check in on my wine I'm making down there. I'm making one here in Napa. So in the fall, in September of this year, I'm going to release Massican B-Sides. And there's going to be 6 winemakers making a Massican wine, their interpretation of a Massican wine. And they were all like small production, 150 cases. And it's like, obviously, and there's some rules. It has to be a white wine because Massican's a white wine winery. And I just give them a blank check. I'm like, do it and just have fun. Make your version of a Massican wine. You have to know me. You have to kind of know Massican. You have to know that I'm not going to do it to a random person who I've never met before, winemaker I've never met before, just because they're cool or something. But so every year I will work with someone else to let them have some fun and make a version of a Massican wine. Little things like that. It's been fun. I got a lot more. Like literally just last night on Instagram, a wine writer in New York posted, why isn't there a Massican blue nail polish for Dan when someone's holding the Massican bottle up and taking a picture of it and match the color of his label. So like little things like that, it sounds goofy and fun. I got 150 DMs saying they would do that. So I'm like, is that a possibility? I'll be releasing a Massican perfume with my wife. She's a perfumer. She has a body wash. We have the body sprays. It's all this kind of Mediterranean, kind of blossomy, citrusy aromas. The perfume is more about like tobacco and juniper if you're musty, and tobacco is if you were in a bar in Italy or at night and people are outside smoking and drinking bitter Camparis and sodas and maybe some gin martinis and stuff like that. Go think 8.5, think kind of Fellini era, black and white, think Rat Pack. So we're doing all that stuff, and I'm just having fun and trying to take Dan Petroski out of Massican and make Massican just a place you want to associate with. Eventually I might be a travel tourist destination or an organization. And my website looks like it's a freaking travel website.
Let me know when you get the Massican blue pop filter. Something to replace my Dorito smelling one.
And it's just all those things. Do I want to do cool shit with Supreme and other places like that? Of course I do. I love that stuff and I invest in that stuff as a collector, but it's not my vibe. But maybe it needs to be. Maybe that's the new audiences, and maybe the NFT space is the new audiences for me. Maybe Bar Massican as an Italian bar needs to be some sort of more Mediterranean vibe. I don't know. We'll see.
That's also cool.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dan, for sharing your...
The last one was I worked with a DJ from Brooklyn to create like a whole Spotify playlist for Massican, which I've released.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's all these different vibes for these Mediterranean, European vibes. There's little things like that. I think the best the best group that did what I thought was the coolest kind of essential universe creation around their brand was the House People, HAUS, the kind of aperitif brand that came out hot and heavy during the pandemic.
That's right.
I think where they misinterpreted their product is depletions and consumption. I think people fail to remember that spirits aren't depleted. You open a bottle of wine, it's gone in 24 hours. You open a spirit or a vermouth, and I know this because I make vermouth. It takes one dry white vermouth bottling is 24 martinis if you like a classic martini.
Yeah.
You don't drink 24 martinis in a night. Even the best bars don't pour 24 martinis in a night. So you have to understand, you can have a great vibe and a great lifestyle, but you have to have the product that actually finances it. And white wine and low alcohol, light, bright, fresh wines disappear. As soon as you open them and you're sitting down with your loved ones, family, friends, and you're opening a second bottle real quick. So you got to remember that at the end of the day, you got to still have many bottles of wine to do all this cool shit.
Yeah.
But
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I'll let you go here. I think you really, this is a good way to start the year because someone who looks ahead to the future so much in so many different areas of their life, whether it's technology or wine and stuff, is, I think, a cool way to start the new year. So definitely appreciate your insights. And probably next time you come and join us, my room will be blue. It's like your font all over the walls and stuff. Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll stay in touch and appreciate you sharing with our audience.
I appreciate you guys too. Keep up the great work, and Billy, good luck with the test next week. And yeah, Brady, we'll work on getting you in some blue tints up there.
Some blue. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Awesome.
Thank you.
See you guys. Ciao.
Awesome. That was our interview with Dan. I hope you guys found it as interesting as I did. Go check out Massican, drink some of their wines, and also, more importantly, even go out and check out the Vint Marketplace website, sign up, make sure you're in the loop with all of our offerings, and we will be back with another episode of the Vint Podcast next week. Cheers.
To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications, including this podcast, is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.